I thought it had stabilised for a minute there, and then it goes up by another couple. I think let's kick off, and people can hopefully join. And the most important thing to say is that obviously all of this session is being recorded. So if anybody wants to catch up with it afterwards, if we say something really groundbreakingly interestingly in this first couple of minutes, then I'm sure they'll be able to access it later on. So firstly, welcome, good morning. Really delighted that you've chosen to join us this morning for our virtual coffee morning, hoping that you're sitting there with a very nice cup of tea or coffee and a biscuit or two as well. This is our second in our digital event series, and we've been really encouraged and really heartened by the response that we've had from people to take part in these activities. So welcome here this morning. I'm just going to start off with a few housekeeping rules, just instructions, so that you know exactly what's going on. So first of all, both Jon and I would be delighted to answer questions that you've got for us this morning. You'll see along the bottom of the screen, you've got a tab which says Q&A, the question and answers tab. You're welcome to ask any questions that you would like to in that tab, and then once we've finished our an initial chat, we'll start to work our way through those questions. We may well not have time to get through all of the questions that we have, and we will do our best to answer as many as we can. You may well want to ask questions that are about specific areas of the university that I'm not necessarily sure that we'll be able to answer, but again, we will do our best to answer whatever questions we can or direct you to information where it would best help as well. If for any reason we don't manage to answer a question that you particularly wanted answered in the course of this morning, then you are welcome to email alumni-events@bristol.ac.uk. That's alumni-events@bristol.ac.uk, and we will endeavour to get back to you with an answer as quickly as we can. If we can ask you to use the question and answers panel purely for questions to Jon and I, if you've got any technical issues at all, or if you've got problems with Zoom, if you can use that email address again, so the alumni-events@bristol.ac.uk, the events team are sort of in the background monitoring the event, and so they should be able to help as well. I hope that you've got a view whereby you are just seeing Jon and my videos. If you're seeing more blank tiles, then you do have a facility up in the top square here. If you hover over a blue screen, you can click on a button that says hide those without video, and so that it just makes it easy to see both of us. But hopefully we've managed to arrange that so that you've got the right view, but you have the freedom within Zoom to adapt that yourself. So I think that's all the housekeeping rules, just to say we're not expecting a fire alarm, and if you do hear a fire alarm, then it's in your house, not mine, and therefore please do something about it. But yeah, that seems to be the normal thing that we would say at the start of any event, so we might as well say it at the start of a digital event as well. So with those all under our belt, let me first welcome Jon and thank him for joining me this morning, and say, Jon, could you take a moment to introduce yourself?
I would be delighted, and thank you so much for this opportunity to engage on the digital agenda, and also delighted to see so many people joining on the Zoom session as well today. So a very quick introduction from me. My name is Jon Phillips. I'm the chair of the Alumni Association, but my connection, my engagement, my relationship with the University of Bristol goes back probably slightly too many years, if I'm absolutely honest. I was a graduate of the university, of course. I did an earth sciences geology degree in Bristol in 1991 to 1994. And from that, I did a sabbatical year, something that you and I know have in common, Andrew. I did a sabbatical year and I was the grand title of the General Secretary of the Students' Union for a year in the mid-90s, which was a fantastic opportunity to engage with students, to engage in the university life and university leadership. Post my initial years in Bristol, if you will, I had a successful career at Coca-Cola. I was head of digital communications at that particular company, and then became a consultant. And now I run a consultancy business based in London. I was also chair of the trustees for the Students' Union, and that was the role immediately prior to my taking this one as chair of the Alumni Association. So my relationship with the city, my relationship with the university, I think is, gosh, it's almost 30 years long, which ages me terribly, but it has been an amazing opportunity and actually an amazing privilege be engaged with the university at various levels. So delighted to be here, and it's a real, as I said, it's a real privilege to be part of this digital agenda.
Thank you ever so much, John. So just to introduce myself, so I'm Andrew Munk. I've been with the university for about 2.5 years now. So some of you I have met before, many of you I know that I haven't. I was previously the deputy director and headed up the philanthropy team in Darrow. And when Steve O'Connor, who many of you will know, moved on to pastures new, moving back up to be closer to family up in Leicestershire, I took over as director. My first day being the first day of lockdown, which is a curious time to take over leading the team. But I've been incredibly proud and privileged to lead Darrow, but also to lead our work engaging with such a global community as well. And actually, it's the way in which that community has come together that has been just remarkable over the past few weeks / months now, I suppose. So as John said, I similarly was a sabbatical officer way back when at my university. I didn't study at Bristol. I studied up in Scotland, but I was so my grand title was Vice President Services, Treasurer and Events. So I was responsible for all of the end of year balls, etc., which was a very nice responsibility to have when I was a student. But it galvanized my passion for higher education and that sense of the importance of the community that comes with the university. So not just the direct community that is there on campus at any one time, the students and the academic community, but that whole spirit of the wider alumni body. And I think when I was involved in the Students' Union, we were really fortunate to actually start to pilot alumni engagement, and we were involved in the very first tentative steps of alumni mentoring back in the late 90s at my university, and that really showed me that power. From there, I've worked for a whole range of organisations and charities, but I've been in the Southwest now for pretty much 20 years, coming up to 20 years, which is, as you say, John, slightly frightening when you start thinking about that. But so have been a fan of the university and knowledgeable about the university for a number of years, but getting to know that community and getting to know the breadth and reach that the university has is just a real privilege every day. So what I thought we would start off with is just by John and I having a bit of a chat, really, and a brief conversation. But please do at any point start asking us questions, and we will pick those up in a moment. But if first of all I can say to you, John, I wonder what's top of your mind at the moment.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. You know, we're both relatively fresh in role, and I'll turn the tables and ask the similar question of you in just a second. So I've only been in role now, as you know, for about 9 months, and it's been quite an interesting journey, I suppose, over those last 9 months. We've had the journey from the old convocation model into the new alumni committee, and we have had an amazing group of people who are now volunteering as part of that new Alumni Association Committee. Some fabulous alum and some brilliant minds coming together to create some new initiatives and new ways of outreach to the alum. Regrettably, one of the things that we had in mind for this year was supposed to be last month, which was the Alumni Forum. So we did a lot of engagement and build plans ready for that, what I would concede to be the premier event for alumni engagement across our calendar. And regrettably, we've been unable to do that for very obvious reasons. So I'm very alive to the point, and what's fresh on my mind is how we re-engage, I suppose, in this mid and post-COVID world, when we can't physically meet alum in the way that we have historically done. And I guess, you know, front of mind, therefore, is digital. That is my native experience, that is, if you will, my profession. But I think this is a great way to outreach to our global community. And, you know, the alumni community is absolutely staggering. Every time I hear these numbers, it sends shivers down my spine, because I'm so excited about the breadth and the reach of that community. We are 165,000 people strong and growing by some 10,000 people per year. We are a global audience. I forget the precise number, but I know it's in the region of 130, 140 countries that our alum are resident in right now. So that, for me, is a huge opportunity. It's front of mind about how we can make alumni events, not something that requires the trip to Bristol, and actually can maybe engage people in a much wider way, such in fact as we're doing in a reasonably small way today. So those are the things on my mind: how the alumni committee comes together and how we create events and how we engage, and particularly about the power of digital to outreach to our global community. But I know that you're relatively fresh in role as well, Andrew, and you know, you have the benefit of maybe a couple of years of pre-work almost ahead of me before taking on this particular role. But what's on your mind? How do you see the agenda for you?
Well, so I think it's very true. When we started the conversations at the sort of latter part of January, early February, when Steve announced his departure, it's not quite the situation that I thought I was going to be taking on and taking over from Steve. I don't think I had quite predicted this one, as many people hadn't. I think the one of the things that I am very aware of is the fact that actually the speed of change has been phenomenal and really transformational in what we do, and the way in which the team within Darrow has adapted, but also the team across the university and the wider community has adapted, has been really fantastic to see change come about that normally we would talk about for months, if not years, before we actually manage to action. So I think part of my mind is the responding to the challenges that the university currently has, and there are a few obvious things that have been reported across the media, which are facing Bristol like any other university. So the constraints around the financial landscape for next year, the concern that there is around student numbers and that experience for students coming to study at Bristol, what's going to happen with our international student numbers and those people wanting to come and engage. But what happens to our research agenda as well, which thrives on the collaboration and thrives on the international nature as well. So that there are some quite sort of challenging questions for Bristol as to how we move forward. Now, I'm pleased to say, I'm proud to say that the university is very well placed to face those challenges and to overcome them. And I think what's really positive is the fact that those challenges are being seen as opportunities for evolution and permanent change, as opposed to responding to a quick fix for the short term. It's about the longer term. For me, it provides real opportunities to think about how our alumni can really have the greatest value and impact and enrich their relationship with the university. And so when you look across the board from some of our recruitment activity and the fact that our staff can't travel, but we have alumni in countries dotted, as you say, around the world, and how can they be involved in our recruitment activity? We have virtual open days for our UK students. How can we add and enrich our alumni into that environment? And you're seeing that come to fruition. But I think, I mean, one of the things that's top of my mind is just how absolutely blown away I have been of the way in which the alumni community have responded to the crisis and our various calls for support in all kinds of forms. Not least, of course, it's the philanthropic support that they've given to support our fundraising efforts around the COVID-19 research. Bristol has that real strength. So we were one of only 2 universities in the UK licensed to work on the coronavirus vaccine, coronavirus disease itself. And we were working on it for many months before the pandemic sort of hit the UK. And we've seen that response come through thick and fast. And we've got an event next week where you'll have an opportunity to hear more about that response as well. There's also alumni support for our students. And yes, that's about hardship funds and that's about financial support. But more than that, the nicest thing that I've seen since I've taken over as director was that within a week, we were talking about what happens to our students who are left isolated in Bristol. So we had a number of students for various different reasons they weren't able to return home. Either that there wasn't space for them at home, they were care leavers who had no home to return to, they were international students who, for logistical reasons, in some cases their home countries have been shut down, so they weren't able to travel back. And we had a real worry about those students who weren't choosing to stay in Bristol but actually had to stay in Bristol. How would they be supported and connected? And so we launched a program called Bristol Voices and had a phenomenal response from the alumni. And the purpose of that was, it wasn't about career mentoring, it wasn't about anything as sort of detailed as that, it was simply just a connection. It was somebody checking in with those alumni, a friendly face, somebody to make contact with, and that response has been phenomenal. You then, more recently, we had our medical students who graduated early, and we graduated them via Zoom, which was a fascinating experience in itself, in April, so that they could go and work on the front line across the NHS already. But we were aware that we were graduating these students to go and work in an environment unprecedented, like nothing that you would normally go into straight after graduation. And so we went to our medical alumni who were working in the hospitals where those students were ending up, and just said, there were 700 people, and we went and said, would you be willing to mentor, to support, to look out for our graduates as you come? And I think it was over 100 came back and said that they would be willing to take part in that almost immediately. And that's where you see the power of the community coming together and responding to those specific needs. So I think that's a rather long-winded answer, but that's sort of top of my mind, I think.
Yeah, I think there's some interesting themes in there that we maybe can explore today, or indeed in other areas as well. One is around the agility of an organization. I've been struck by how amazing the university has been as an institution, but also how it's reflected to staff, to alum. Programs that might have taken 6 months or a year to organize from seed to fruition really are taking a fraction of that time. And in fact, in some ways, this very session today is a very good example of that. I think the other key areas of challenge that I think alum have a great deal to offer, and I think are probably front of mind at the university, are around recruitment and around employability. These are going to be huge challenges for the university, but also for those graduates who are just leaving. The newest members of our alumni community will probably need some help, as you say, from a medical point of view, or it could be those who are going into other careers for whom this is an extraordinary time to be joining the workforce. So yeah, I think anything that we can do to assist has got to be great value, I hope, to the future alum.
And when you look across all of those different things, what reasons do you see for being happy at the moment?
That is a really interesting question. Those who know me, and I know we are getting to know each other today, but also those who are on the call will find me a ridiculous optimist. I will always look for the positives in this situation. That isn't to dilute what I know has been a huge emotional, cultural, social challenge for everyone on this call and for the entire country, but there are some positives which I think we can absolutely take out of this. One I mentioned is around agility. I have been so impressed by how people have taken that virtual bull by the horns. They have taken the opportunity to make a difference to those neighbors, colleagues, community members across wherever those folks are. I've been super impressed by that, super impressed by the speed of agility and the speed of change in organizations. That has been absolutely amazing. But I think for me, and I speak here as a digital professional, but also of course of chair of alum, I'm delighted to see how these two worlds can come together. I'm delighted to see how we can bring digital into the alumni relationship and alumni community build, and to make the very best of that. So we may not be able to physically meet, but that doesn't stop us meeting. We may not be able to one-on-one, face-to-face mentor, but that does not mean that we cannot mentor. And those, I think, are the things that I'm taking away right now, is to say, just think different, because there are ways that we can still meet those existing challenges. And as a group of alumni, I hope that we all can embrace those opportunities that this particular crisis is creating, unfortunately, for us. There are a couple of things that I'm really looking forward to. When I look at the digital agenda, you'll notice that I'm on the program next month to put on my game show hat and to be host of an alumni quiz, which I think is probably the first time that I've done that in about 20 years, but I'm absolutely delighted to be quiz master for that session. And actually, again, in a lighthearted way, it's a great way of bringing community together and just to remind ourselves as to who we are as alum. And I think to echo one of your previous thoughts, just about what the value that our community can make to current and potentially to future students. Your example around Bristol Voices, your example around mentoring of medical students actually gives me great hope and great optimism for the strength and depth and the levels of engagement that alum have with the university and with the city. It's a fabulous thing to hear. And what about you? Let's be positive. What's exciting you? What's engaging you? What are you looking forward to?
Well, I think again, as we're finding, as we've been talking through in preparation for this, the level of character overlap between the two of us is quite frightening. So I've been described as having a puppy-like enthusiasm about things by the team before. So I similarly am the eternal optimist, and I think, as you say, it's important to note the fact that this horrible disease has affected society, has affected communities, and has affected individuals, and that is just something which is heartbreaking. And I think what's been fascinating or significant for us is the fact that we've watched a wave of this go across the world because of our global alumni community. We were aware of this right the way back in January when we were talking to our Chinese alumni about what we should be doing about graduation and how events in China were affecting our planning there. And you're watching this move across the world, and you're now looking at South America, where we have a growing alumni population, and to Africa as well. And what we want to explore, or what's a positive that I think can come from this, is how we can bridge those societies, how we can bridge the learning from one to the other, because I'm not sure that always our governments are doing it very successfully. But I think one of the things that makes me very happy at the moment is the way in which communities are coming together, whether that's me going out on the front step on a Thursday evening and clapping with all of the neighbours, or whether it's looking at how the communities across the university are coming together. The one thing that seems to be true in society today is the fact that we've found it to be a unifying and drawing together experience. And that sense of community then can carry through to everything that we do. And I think that's where that's the positive that you take from this, because that's what will actually carry us forward. So I'm just thinking, I'm looking at time and thinking, shall we turn and just look at some of the questions that are coming through? And I'll pick off one very quickly. So Lorna asked, do you have a demographic picture of the active alumni, including age? You'll be pleased to know we do, and it's really interesting around how our alumni is changing. So one of the really surprising things that I found is that well over 50% of our alumni are aged 40 or under. Because of the number of alumni that we have graduating each year and the way in which the university has grown. It's really interesting when you look at gender balance, in that the younger our alumni, we have more women graduating than we have men graduating in our younger alumni. But as you go into our older alumni demographics, then that's skewed the other way. And what's certainly true is that we have pockets of activity. We've tried to map, and it seems to be at different life points people become actively engaged with the university. There's a warmth on post graduation and those years of freedom before you're tied down by work and family and other commitments, where you feel that connection back to the university. There's then a sort of lull as you have your own families and get distracted elsewhere. But as children start to reach their teenage years, then I think that there is a real surge of interest, because you're suddenly looking at universities again with a different eye, and as parents, and certainly into that pride and that nostalgia piece and that sense of community bringing together. As people move through their careers and have more time to participate, then you see that wave of involvement and participation coming through again. We do look at this quite regularly, and we're trying to think about what it feels like to be an alum of Bristol across all of those different segments and stages of life, and what is the relevance for us, for the Alumni Association Committee and for the university, to each of those stages, and how can we be an active part. But it's fascinating looking at the demographics of it.
And just to build on that point, it was a really excellent question, so thank you for asking that. One thing that I was struck when I was looking at the the demographics of our 165,000 was a couple of important things, and this is also reflected in the new constitution for our committee. So you mentioned the increasing prevalence of women over men in our graduate group. We therefore must make sure we have fair representation of women on our committee. You also importantly recognize the fact that our alum as an average is getting younger. And we know that because there are more people graduating from Bristol now who are, to state their obvious, mostly in their 20s, early 20s, than there have ever been graduating from the university in history. So the average age of our alum is getting lower and lower. And as you say now, the average is sub 40. So again, that is something that I have taken on board when I think about the constitution of that committee. And the final point, again, we are increasingly global. So alum are more likely than ever from the University of Bristol to be non-UK, so European or indeed wider afield than that. So as a reflection of that, one of my challenges has been, you know, as a 48-year-old white male, I am not the average alum. So how can I make sure that we are connecting to the average alum as best as we possibly can? So I have made sure that from a committee level, we now have BME representation. We have nearly half of our group, which is women. That's not enough, but we are making good progress on that. And importantly, we have 4 of our committee who are under the age of 40. And this, I think, is progress, and it's a good step. We have further to go, but I'm proud of the work that we've done to make sure that our committee looks much more like our 165,000 people than ever before.
So can I build on that and ask so Linda has asked a question which says, what plans does the new committee have for engaging with the existing and already expanding network of alumni groups, such as hall associations, branches, clubs and societies with alumni membership for the benefit of the network groups, the university and the current and prospective students?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and Linda and I know each other offline as well. So I'm engaging with those groups in a number of different ways, but I want to almost make this a call out and a watch out for future opportunities as well. The previous committee had numbers on the board who were leading those particular broader hall residents and other branches. And we don't have that connection anymore, but Linda has already set up a brilliant group, and kudos to her, with various members of the leaderships of the various branches and networks across the country. And she kindly invited me to be a member of that. And that is one of the ways in which we are staying connected with it. But the other opportunity, again, in this mid-COVID world is digital. So I think it's important to mention Bristol Connect, which I know is one of your flagship programs as well, Andrew, as part of Darrow, which I think looked like a great opportunity to outreach and to connect with whatever your emotional connection is with the university. For some, that might be a hall of residence. For other, it could be a club and society, or even a particular department. That feels like a great way of connecting. How do you reflect on Bristol Connect, and how might it play into this story for us?
Well, I think it's quite fascinating in that the Bristol Connect platform was always about trying to create an online community. And our first challenge in creating an online community is, how do we encourage people to go online? And then we find ourselves in a situation where people's entire lives have moved, with both work, socializing, everything else has moved online. And so I think it then becomes an easier step, as it were, to actually draw the alumni community onto there. I think what Bristol Connects offers is so the Bristol Connects platform allows you to register and upload your profile, and it will be the main way in which we will be encouraging alumni to update details, to stay in touch with us. But what it then has is various different areas in which you can do different things on the site. So one is you can offer advice and support to students. And so you basically flag yourself on there, and then current students and fellow alumni can come on and find the person that they want to ask a question of. And we're resisting referring to that as mentoring, because it's a more immediate relationship than that. It's not really designed for that long-term engagement, but it's how you can find answers very quickly about a particular career, about moving to a particular area, or simply about what's it like graduating from X, Y, or Z as well. So I think that's a powerful tool for people to use. The other areas that we're starting to see Bristol Connects, but it is still in the formative stages, is that we can have online networks. So we can host a network around a range of subjects, whether that's a geographic area, whether that's alumni living in a particular city somewhere within the world or within the UK, or indeed it's about people working in a particular field, so people working in the digital tech industry, or whether it's medics or teachers. It can be a network that feels relevant to you, and we can work with people to help establish those networks, invite people to join, but actually set up that network around there. One of the things that I'm conscious of, there is another question on here, which is about, so Alison put a question about, you mentioned that alumni abroad have helped the university. Could you give an example? Are there things the English branch of Bristol Alumni could be doing to help? So on the international example, something that we are just trialing now is something that we're calling Study Expert, which is a system using Bristol Connects, which connects people who have applied to study in Bristol with a very recent graduate, so somebody who's studied here within the last 5 years, so that they can ask questions about what is it like to come, and it's part of their experience of connecting with the university before they even come and choose to study at Bristol. But alumni are part of that journey from the start. We're trialing it because we have no idea what the take-up will be like. We don't know whether or not it will work. And so we're trialing it with a particular group of alumni and a particular cohort within the School of Management recruitment profile. But once we've learnt how that works, then I would like to roll that out more widely. Part of the question was as well about what an English branch or an English network can or a British network can do to support the university. And I think there is no doubt that travel will be restricted. Our level of engagement will change. Our ability to go and meet across the country will change. And I really hope that we will see that situation evolve, so that actually that study expert not only is rolled out to international students, but is for our UK students as well, helping to connect and to do that. And all of those different platforms that we talked about, so the Bristol Voices, registering on Bristol Connects, none of those require you to particularly be in an international country. The whole beauty of them is that you can be absolutely anywhere and take part. You can be living in Redland next door to the university and still being able to register online. It means that you can be part of that community. So I think that that's how we can really work to build that community.
And as you say, it kind of talks to that previous point about the importance of alumni in the recruitment process, which I think is a fabulous opportunity. Before I skip to another question, there is one which is snuck in, which is relating to Bristol Connect. So maybe we can try and attempt that one now. Without wishing to put you on the spot with an exact number, it would be super useful to understand the level of active participation in Bristol Connect at this point. Do you have a feel for that?
You've now put me on the spot. I'm trying to remember. I have a feeling that it's certainly in the thousands. I think it's in the early thousands. It's about 3,000 or 4,000 last time I heard, but I equally don't want to be completely inaccurate. So it might be that I need to actually just check with the engagement team about what the current registrations is. I know that we've seen an sort of pick up in registrations in the current environment, which is a really positive thing. So, but yeah, more and more people joining, and we would like to see that number increase. And I'm going to pick up, because there's a really interesting question on the back of that as well, which is from Philip about, are you encouraging spreading the word about Bristol Connects beyond those that you reach by email? And this is a fantastically pertinent question for us at the moment, because when we are moving so many things digitally, we currently can contact about 70,000 of our alumni by email. So which is not bad, but that's obviously 90-odd thousand that we are not contacting by email. And we're trying to think about how we can engage more widely, what we can do. But there are constraints. There are constraints in terms of budget within the university. And writing to 100,000 people is a very expensive exercise. We want to drive more. We think that one of the ways in which we can drive that is word of mouth. If we can encourage our alumni to encourage their contacts for our fellow Bristol alumni to join, that will be a powerful campaign in itself. But if anybody has any thoughts or ideas about what we should be doing, we'd be delighted to hear them, because we are challenging ourselves to think about how, when we're excluding some of our community by communicating primarily online, how can we reach a wider audience?
Fabulous. And I know that we now have our answers, such as the magic of digital that you can't do face-to-face. It's over 4,000 people are on Bristol Connect right at this point, which is fantastic.
I was reasonably accurate. I'm so thrilled.
Perfect. Let me take the question from Philip, because I think this is an interesting one as well, which is, he says, now we've now got Zoom. Will the alumni forums incorporate some of this future technology so that those who can't travel can engage? Philip, I'm both disappointed and also excited to tell you that the Alumni Forum, which we unfortunately had to cancel for this year, did have digital connection involved in the planning. So the idea of it was that for those who were going to be in Bristol, the 250, 300 maybe who could make it to the city in order to engage in it one-on-one, would get an experience, but also that we would be streaming as much of that as we could to a digital audience, so that as many of the 165,000 who wanted to could engage in that event as well. So I'm disappointed, because actually we had great plans to make this almost like a hybrid event in April. But let's be positive again. You'll find me optimistic. We are lifting and shifting many of those plans from the cancelled event to a future event. So I hope that if we can't see you in person, Philip, in Bristol, then we can certainly see you online. And that makes great sense to me as a digital professional, but it is obviously the way that we will be probably for the next couple of years, I think. So next time round, I suspect it will be, I hope genuinely, a hybrid event, physical as well as digital. But if it's not, we are certainly already looking at ways in which we might be able to do something like an alumni forum in a purely digital format, which I think would be fantastic if we can pull that off. So thank you, Philip. Great question. Happy to answer that.
Can I just build on that as well? Because I think so I have to take my hats off to our events team, who are operating in the background, making this whole thing work. But we've been talking for some time about wanting to pilot digital events and working out how we could do that, and the fact that we've managed to get quite a comprehensive digital events program off the ground within 5 weeks. I'm incredibly grateful to the team for making that happen. But I think what we're very clear about is, once, and this comes back to what I was saying about the university, of let's not just change to fix a problem in the short term, let's adapt and change to do something that is more significant for the longer term. And for us, as we're learning about these digital events and how we can put them together effectively, and what's useful and what's interesting that people want to hear about, we would really anticipate that digital events become a part of our events program. That it's not an either or. We would be delighted where we have those key flagship events, such as the Alumni Forum or the Alumni Awards, where we can bring in a virtual element for those not able to be there on the night. But beyond those as well, I hope that our physical events will be complemented by an ongoing program of digital events as well, to ensure that we can have as wider engagement as possible.
Perfect. And to echo that, I know that we've already got a pretty substantial digital agenda aligned for the next few months. The quiz, I'm sure, will be the highlight, but there are other things going on, I'm sure. But I think that's a reflection of the work that your team is doing, which is absolutely fantastic. So again, I'll pass my thanks to them for these efforts, which have been monumental and really important to connect when we can't physically meet each other. I'm seeing again in the questions a couple which are not questions, which nevertheless are very, very welcome. Some alum, and also from Joss Clark, who I know is our Lord Mayor, outreaching and saying, I'd like to stay connected and I'd like to try and help. Thank you both to Sean and to Joss. We will make sure that we capture those points and pass those to the relevant parties, because yeah, wherever we can help, I think there's this sense of community that we would like to try and do so, and I appreciate the sentiment in both of those. This is an interesting question. We'll give this a shot, shall we, Andrew? Barry asks, delighted that the alum profile is getting younger. He doesn't mention his precise age, but gives a small hint. Is there anything useful that us older guys can do? And I know, Andrew, there are many programs that require, need, and are enhanced by alum volunteers. So I suspect there may be one or two things that Barry, with his undoubted experience, can certainly help. Maybe you'd like to talk about one or two of those opportunity points.
Well, I think I think it's a recent example of something that we've already discussed, but is very powerful and is entirely age agnostic. But the Bristol Voices work, I think what was very interesting is that one of the things that almost some of the students were looking for was almost that parental / grandparental figure. They weren't looking for the support to tell them about how to get into a particular career or anything else like that. It was about making that connection, and I think programs like that are a great way to volunteer and engage. Where it's about our students' experience and the enthusiasm and well-being of the students, that's entirely age agnostic, I would say, in terms of people benefit from having that richness and diversity of engagement. I'm struggling to come up with a specific example that I know of right now, partly because the whole way in which our alumni volunteering program, we're trying to work out how we respond to the changing dynamics of the experience that students will be facing next year. And we're working with the student union to actually try and understand what the current primary issues are for students as we move into the new normal, as we're so commonly talking about at the moment. Within that, I am sure that there will be programs. I just don't know exactly what they are yet. But please do stay in touch, keep an eye out, and don't just think because of something is about engaging with students. It really is enriched by having people and volunteers of every demographic and age group that there is within our alumni community to be part of those initiatives.
Brilliant. Andrew, we're almost at time, and there have been some brilliant questions. I think I'm going to just ask you to reflect, if you can. We've covered a lot of topics inside 45 minutes, but I wondered if there's one or two takeaways from you from today's session.
So I hate to feel like a broken record, but I think that the sense of community, the interest that comes from what the university has done, and there were a couple of questions submitted beforehand that we haven't been able to get to today, partly because we felt that we weren't necessarily able to do them full justice. So questions about the university's research response to COVID-19, our work on as part of the vaccine trials and to understand the virus, and also questions relating to what it will be like to be a student at Bristol next year. Both incredibly important and pertinent questions that I hope that we can answer in future events. But what I found over the past few months is a swelling of a sense of pride amongst alumni in the university, in the way that it's responding and the role that it is playing as well. And I think that pride comes through in all that we do. And above all else, I think for me, it's about, I'm thrilled that our alumni have that sense of pride in Bristol, because I know that we have a sense of pride in all that our alumni are contributing to and doing as well. And we're at the moment sort of collating some of the ways in which our alumni have been involved in different initiatives across communities, across making PPE equipment, working on the front line, responding to the crisis. And that is just phenomenal to read. And I'm just very proud to be in some small way part of helping to facilitate that community come together. How about you, John? What's your reflection?
Yeah, you touch on some really important words, and I'm conscious of time, so allow me just to almost wordsmith a few of those bits and pieces. Pride, community, agility, engagement are where it's been at for me. I've been hugely impressed by the number of people who've connected with me, who've messaged me, who I know who've messaged you and said, whatever we can do to help, we want to help. And I think that's, it speaks volumes for the emotional connection which people have with the University of Bristol and their sense of community and wanting to give back. And in particular, to touch on one point, which is, what is it like to be a student at Bristol in 2021 in 21-22. I think these are some of the ongoing challenges, and I think something that we maybe can touch on in a future session, but I know that is on the minds of many alumni. That's it for me. This has been a hugely useful session. I hope I've really enjoyed this conversation with you. Is there anything else that we need to touch upon before we close?
I think so that there are a couple of notes from me, which is if there is something that you desperately wanted to ask us or that you feel that we haven't answered fully, please do feel free to email us. So email alumni-events@bristol.ac.uk, and we'll do our best to get back to you. There have been a few comments and questions coming through with offers of help or asking about how we can get more people registered on Bristol Connects. Again, if you drop an email to that email address, then we can pick up on that afterwards as well, and share any details and make sure that people are connected where they need to be connected. So I think for me, I just want to say a massive thank you to Jon. Thank you for your leadership of our newly formed Alumni Association Committee and the wider work of the Alumni Association. But thank you for your time this morning. I really appreciate it. And it's been, for me too, it's been a pleasure to be able to have this conversation. Now, in the interest of answering some of the questions that we didn't answer, the next digital event that we have is on Wednesday, the 10th of June. It's from 4:30 to 5:30. It's hosted by Professor Jane Norman, who's Dean of our Faculty of Health Sciences. There'll be an introduction from Professor Hugh Brady, our Vice Chancellor, reflecting on some of the challenges that the university is facing and reflecting on how the university has responded to the current crisis. And then the substantive part is a presentation by Professor Adam Finn, who's acted as chair. He doesn't like to be called the chair, but he is, in effect, of our Uncover group, which was a collaboration of researchers, which ended up being a group of over 160 researchers within the university who have come together to work on all aspects of COVID-19 research. So he will share how that group has worked. And hopefully by the 10th of June, some of their initial findings as well on some of the vaccine trials and drug trials that they've been part of as well. Amazing. So at this point, Jon and I are going to disappear very shortly, but at that point, the events team will be enabling the chat function. And so please do feel free to stay on the line and you'll be able to chat with all the other people who are on this call. I'd just like to say thank you again to everybody for joining us this morning, for taking the time to join us. I've really enjoyed it, and thank you for some very sensible and pertinent questions along the way. As we say, this is an ongoing events program, an ongoing way to connect. You don't need to wait for the next event. Please do reach out and connect with either Jon or myself or the wider team at any point that we can help or answer any questions for you. But thank you very much to Jon. I'm looking forward to the pub quiz, and I'm going off to start my research now so that I can be ready. If you've got any tips on what are the likely rounds, then that would be really useful for us all.
I'm looking behind on your shelf to work out which books you've got, as is the Zoom way. Those will not be the topics.
Thank you very much, everybody. Look forward to seeing you again very soon. Thank you.
Thank you for the time. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.